Better late than never. It's March, but here are the 16 books I read in January. Honestly, a mixed bag of reads.
Couldn't recommend this one more. This book was incredible. This one was just not good.
But lots of highly anticipated books were read.
Hi besties, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Susan. I post bookish lifestyle and other girly content, and today we are doing my January reading wrap up. Every month on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts, I do like the rapid fire version of this, where I do a rapid fire review of the books I read each month with a simple yes or no. But so many of you have been requesting more details because there's only so many details I can give with a one-word answer, so let's get into it. These are going to be spoiler-free reviews, but if you don't want to know like anything about a book, then maybe skip that specific review. We're just gonna go in the order that I read each book. Starting with Where the Dark Stands Still. First of all, this cover is gorgeous, and I sadly did not like this book as much as I thought I would. I think I gave it 3 or 3.5 stars. I kind of don't remember, which is not great, but the cover. This is a YA fantasy. I think it's based off of Polish folklore, which is so cool. I love these sorts of woodsy fantasy books that are based on folklore. The female main character, in her village, magic is forbidden, but of course she has magic, so then to get rid of her magic she goes to the Spirit Wood, which is the magical forest that surrounds the village. Once she's in the woods, she bargains with the warden of the woods, and she agrees that for 1 year she is going to help him kind of restore his manor in the woods, and then after that year passes he'll grant her wish. First of all, the aesthetic of this was amazing. I loved the magic system and all of the spirits and the magical essence. It was very ethereal vibes. However, I'm not just reading a book for the aesthetic, even though the aesthetic was 1,000 out of 10. The characters, it's like I liked each character individually, but their relationship development was not the best. It's supposed to be like fantasy romance, however, like all the energy I feel like went into the aesthetic and making the woods seem so magical that the romance was kind of put on the back burner. Also, I kind of had to force myself to finish this because I drew it for one of the mini book TBR videos. It was like somehow way too slow in parts, but also it was really fast paced in other parts. Very mixed bag. But a lot of people do like this. I just think for me personally, what I've realized, and especially with Belladonna too, is that when I read fantasy, I need it to be more of an epic action-based fantasy rather than a standing around the castle type fantasy. Then I read my first Mariana Zapata book. This is Kulti. This is a soccer romance. It's like 600 pages. Maybe it's not 600 pages, it's like 540 pages. That is a lot for a romance book. I gave this one 4 stars and it was so slow burn, which is okay. I do like slow burn. However, the characters need to like talk within the first like 200 pages. By page 200, the characters probably had 3 interactions that were just in passing. Need a little bit more than that. This follows Sal, our female main character. She is a soccer player, and during her childhood she got into soccer because Kulti was her icon, her celebrity crush. And of course, while she's playing in Major League Soccer, at least that's what I think it is, I'm not really familiar with soccer, her new coach ends up being her childhood idol, and he's not at all what she expects. She expects him to be this like golden boy type athlete, but he's so grumpy and he's kind of rude. And they slowly develop a friendship, and then later a relationship. Much later a relationship. First of all, I love sports romances where the female main character is an athlete too. The pacing was good, surprisingly, even though it was so long. There wasn't like a ton of unnecessary drama, and the drama that did happen felt necessary to the plot. I almost wish this was told in dual point of view. It's only told from the female main character's perspective because then we could have seen Kulti's emotional backstory. Overall, a solid romance. Kind of makes me want to read more soccer books. Then my first 5-star of the year, The Witch of Colchis. If you like The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and if you had a Percy Jackson era as a kid and or you just had a Greek mythology era at any point of your life, you will love this. If you know the song History of Man by Maisie Peters, that is like the epitome of this book. It's also giving Mad Woman by Taylor Swift. The writing in this was beautiful. It was surprisingly digestible for a book that's told during ancient Greek times. I could not put this down. It's a retelling of Medea. She's a witch and she's also a princess, and she's kind of been outcast her whole life. Her father is this like super problematic king, and when Jason and the Argonauts come to their kingdom to take the Golden Fleece, she decides to leave with Jason, but look at that, Jason is also problematic too, and she's just trying to find her power and find her place in a world full of male dominance and the patriarchy. So it's a very feminist retelling, which I love. It does a great job commenting on women's roles in ancient society. Whether or not you're familiar with the story of Medea, it really goes into why she chose the paths that she chose. Couldn't recommend this one more. Next book I read was The Private Jet by Sarah Goodwin. The publisher sent me an ARC of this, so thank you so much to them. I think I found this author back in August or July when I read 2 of her thrillers when I was at the hair salon. Her books are really fast-paced. They tend to be these stranded on an island, stranded on a boat type thrillers, which I do really enjoy. This follows a group of like influencers and people partying. They're in Thailand. Then they decide to take one of the characters' private jets to this secluded mansion. And of course, the private jet crashes and they're stuck in the middle of the jungle and they have to figure out how to survive. I gave this 4.5 stars. I really like the contrast between seeing these influencers going from this super lavish lifestyle to figuring out how to survive in the wilderness, because power and influence and following count doesn't matter when you're fighting for your life in the jungle. So that was interesting, and one thing that I love about these survival thrillers, especially in this one and the other books that she does, is it shows how power dynamics form and group dynamics, which I think is such a cool psychological concept. And alongside of that, there was a lot of characters versus the elements, which I like a lot. Wasn't the biggest fan of the female main character. She was pretty shallow, which kind of makes sense, and that's part of her character arc. Overall, I could not put this down. I read it in one sitting, which I need to stop doing because it ruins my sleep schedule. And then because I liked The Private Jet so much, I downloaded another one of Sarah Goodwin's books on Kindle Unlimited. This one is The Resort, which I was like, this is the perfect winter thriller, just based on the cover you can see. This one I gave 3 stars. The first half was much better, and then it just kind of got sort of boring and repetitive. We have this married couple, and then they get their car stuck in a snowbank or whatever, and then they're stuck and it's snowing. Then they like decide to leave the car and go look for shelter. You know, not the best idea. They go on like this hike and they find this abandoned resort, and they're like, oh, we're gonna spend the night in this abandoned resort cabin area. And then the female main character, her husband goes missing, she can't find him, and then creepy things start to happen, and then she feels like she's being watched. It was definitely unnerving and a little bit creepy. It just went on too long, and we're just like repeating the same thing day after day, where she wakes up, she can't find her husband, she's cold, and then she goes back to bed. I think too, when it's just like one person that's surviving without the group dynamics, it makes the survivalist thriller a little bit less interesting because you don't have the group dynamic aspect. It was pretty fast paced too, which I did like, and I'm really picky about pacing with thrillers, so that was good, but overall not my favorite book of hers. Then we have Temple of Swoon. This is a rom-com. The publisher actually sent me a copy of this, so thank you to them. This is part of an interconnected standalone series. It's the second book. I actually have not read the first book. My best friend read the first book and she liked it, but she didn't love it, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna read this one. I enjoyed this one. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was just a fun, entertaining adventure rom-com. Nothing like super special, but it was still enjoyable enough. The female main character is an archaeologist, and she decides to lead an unmapped expedition through the Amazon rainforest to discover / find this lost city. And the male main character is a journalist who joins the archaeological team, and he is supposed to report like their findings, except he has an ulterior motive. He wants to sabotage the archaeological team from discovering the city because he wants to protect his mother's legacy since she descends from that lost city. Except then the female main character makes it difficult, and then he falls in love with her. Pacing was great and it was just entertaining, but it was missing that sort of it factor to make it 4 or 5 stars. It wasn't super emotional. It was kind of insta-lovey, which I don't really like that much. The characters didn't have that much chemistry, which I think stems from it being kind of insta-lovey. And obviously because the male main character's goal is to sabotage the mission, there's gonna be a huge miscommunication / breakup. I wish that happened earlier. That happens like towards the very end, which I don't think is great because it doesn't give them enough time to resolve their problems before the book ends. Enjoyed it, just didn't love it. Then we have Meet Your Match by Candy Steiner. I loved Candy Steiner's football romances. The Red Zone Rivals series is so good, so I was so excited to read her hockey romance. I honestly did not like this that much. I think I gave it either 3 or 3.5 stars. As I'm making this video, I'm realizing the first half of this month was a little bit disappointing because I gave a lot of books 3 stars. But the female main character is a content creator for this Tampa Bay blog site. Her job is to follow this rookie hockey player around and document his life in collaboration with the hockey team. And it's like enemies to lovers, but they're like not really enemies, they just don't get along at first. Started off on a strong note, but I didn't love either character character, they both just didn't have enough emotional depth. The male main character definitely felt too stereotypical, kind of one-dimensional, just that typical extroverted, cocky hockey player, which, okay, great, but like, let's give him more of a personality than that. I thought there would be more plot, because there is more plot and subplots outside of the romance in her other books. Though I did like the side characters, and that makes me want to continue the rest of the series, because the other books in the series follows each of the side characters. Then we have a romance that I actually gave more than 3 stars, Give Me Butterflies. I actually got the arc of this in a Goodreads giveaway, so thank you so much to the publishers. Yes, Goodreads giveaways actually do work. If you like Ali Hazelwood's STEM romances, you will love this, and if you like the emotional aspect of Abby Jimenez's romances, you will love Give Me Butterflies. This follows 2 science museum curators. They kind of butt heads at first, but then they slowly develop a friendship and later become in a relationship. Grumpy sunshine, but to the extent that the male main character is grumpy, as in he's introverted and shy rather than being rude. And he's recently taken custody of his 2 nieces, so he's adjusting to the single dad life, which normally is not my favorite trope, unpopular opinion, but it was done really well here. And the female main character is super bright and sunshiny, and she's an entomologist. Based on the synopsis, I thought this would be a lot more workplace romance rather than like single dad romance, but I totally like the direction the author took. It touched on heavier, more emotional topics, but it wasn't too like emotionally heavy. It was still overall lighthearted. Also, I love a low drama, low miscommunication romance. Subplot for the female main character is that she is trying to get a promotion, and the male main character is on the hiring committee, which may or may not pose a problem. Maybe a little forbidden romance here. Then we have one of my most anticipated releases of 2025. I was so excited when the publisher sent me an arc of the Charlie Method, so thank you so much to Bloom Book. This book was incredible. It completely exceeded my expectations. It's the 3rd book in the Campus Diaries series, which is the 2nd generation series of the Briar Youth series and the Off-Campus series. I love the whole Briar University universe. This follows Charlie, Beckett, and Will. Beckett and Will are 2 hockey players. It's their senior year. Charlie is like the perfect straight A sorority student. She feels like she's stuck in that role and she can't really be herself. So identity is a huge theme in this book. And Will is one of the hockey players, and he's dealing with emotional trauma, I guess, from his dad. And Beckett is like the carefree, laid-back hockey player, except he also has trauma that he's hiding. I just love emotional romances. If you know the song Nothing New by Taylor Swift, very how can a person know everything at 18 but nothing at 22, I think all of the pathological people pleasers will relate to Charlie, the female main character. So I adored it. Then we have Gild, which is the 1st book in the Plated Prisoner series. This is a romantasy. It's a dark romantasy. Definitely keep that in mind when reading this, which I hope you do. This is one of the books on Book Talk that did not disappoint me at all. I was surprised how much I loved this. I literally had such bad insomnia one night that I just started reading this, and I read it in one sitting, and then I still couldn't fall asleep afterwards. I wouldn't say this is a retelling of King Midas, but it's more inspired by King Midas. In this book, King Midas pulled the female main character from a bleak life, and now he both figuratively and literally cages her in the castle. So he's offered her protection in his castle for a large portion of her life, and she's his gold touch, she's his favorite. However, when King Midas strikes a deal with an opposing kingdom, the female main character Orange, she feels so betrayed, and then she kind of realizes that maybe King Midas isn't very great. This is written almost like a prequel novella to introduce you to the world, because I know the following books in this series are like double the length of this one. Hard to describe the plot, honestly, because a lot of this is just building the world. Also, if you're like new to the fantasy genre and you're coming from a romance background, I feel like this is a good book to start with. The world building is solid, it's super visual, and it's easy to understand, but also they're giving you enough world building that you're not just like, okay, give me more information. And there's not really much romance at all in this one. I don't even think King Midas is the main guy, but Arin and King Midas's relationship is super interesting because of their power dynamics, and I did like Arin as a female character a lot. She was super confident and headstrong, which I like, instead of like demure. Kind of a disappointment. I hate to say it. I loved Fourth Wing. I loved Iron Flame. It took me like 4 days to read this. I wrote like an entire essay about my thoughts of this on Goodreads. Let me just say that Riddick is my favorite character in this universe. If you still haven't read this yet, I'm gonna comment on like the pacing and the world building and some of the relationship development, but like I'm not gonna spoil anything. But if you don't want to know like my thoughts about like the pacing or just like a broad, very unspecific review, then I would skip this section. My biggest fear is spoiling popular books. I don't want to spoil books for you. My main issue with this is it felt so much like a thriller book. I honestly think this book series would have been better if it was a trilogy instead of 5 books. However, after seeing Rebecca Yarros speak in Denver at the theater, I have kind of a more of an appreciative view of this. However, I feel like this was just setting up for the last 2 books in the series. In my Goodreads review, I said this is the book version of This Call Could Have Been an Email. I love fantasy world building. I know a lot of people don't like info dumping, but I love a good info dump because I really love getting into the world. The world building that was going on here was not very well done, honestly. So many people I know were so confused by this, and I think that's because of the execution of the world building. All of a sudden we're referring to characters by their first and their last names, or just by their last names, when we really hadn't been using their last names at all in the previous 2 books, and that just kind of like bothers me for consistency purposes. Let's just use everybody's last names from the very first book. Like, I didn't know Riddick's last name was Gamlin. The pacing in this was not very good. It was way too slow in some parts. I did really like the action scenes. Let's just not stand around bad guys. Like, I don't really like books, again, where people are just standing around the castle or whatever. Like, we need some action because we're shifting away from the romantasy and more towards high fantasy. The spice scenes felt a little bit out of place, even though I love Xaden and Violet, especially Xaden. He's so attractive. The like romance just felt like it didn't fully fit in with the new direction this book series seems to be going in. Also, there were so many side characters. Like, I love side characters, but I felt like I was missing that found family aspect from Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. A lot of the side characters just appeared and disappeared with no real purpose. So many of the side characters just existed for moving the plot forward, which is like, okay, but then I'm like, can we actually have some more characterization of the side characters? After reading this, I've realized that I like fantasy books a lot better when they're told in third person multi-point of view, or even first person but multi-point of view. That was my Onyx Storm rant. However, I need to see more of Bodhi and Garrick. Bodhi's song being I Look in People's Windows by Taylor Swift. I need more Bodhi. Then after finishing Onyx Storm, I'm like, I need to read something more fast-paced, so I picked up this thriller, No Place Left to Hide. Gave this 2.5 stars. Just was not very good. If you like the show Pretty Little Liars, I think you'll like some of the vibes of this. The female main character, Brooke, she is a high school senior, I think, and on the last day or whatever of senior year, she and her best friend go to this party, and then on their way home they realize they're being followed, and then it turns into sort of a cat and mouse type thing. The pacing was decent. I thought this would be scary and full of suspense, but I'm just like, okay, like, can I just finish this book? It was not at all satisfying. The ending was so easy to predict. None of the characters were likable. There was a big Mean Girls thing going on, which, okay, that like works, but didn't care about any of the characters, so not my favorite at all. And then Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonham Young, another one of my most anticipated for 2025. Incredible. By far my favorite read of January. The publisher sent me an ARC of this, so thank you so much to Adele Romance. You guys are the best. I adored Out on a Limb. If you've been following me, you know that that book is like one of my top tier romances of all time. I didn't think I would love a book more than Out on a Limb, but somehow Out of the Woods almost surpassed Out on a Limb. I like how this book did not follow like the typical romance book formula. There's no like, oh, meet cute, fall in love, third act breakup, get back together. It doesn't follow that formula, and unlike a typical second chance romance, it doesn't follow the, oh, we loved each other, we fell in love in like high school, college, and then we broke up, we haven't seen each other in 10 years, and then we're gonna get back together. It didn't follow that either. It was second chance in the way that our female and male main characters, Sarah and Caleb, they got married young when they were 19 because Sarah's mother had a terminal illness, so they wanted to get married while she could still be there. And then 10 years later, their marriage has almost reached a breaking point, and to rekindle their marriage and their love, they decide to go on this retreat in the outdoors, and it's a hiking retreat, and they're both not at all outdoorsy people. This book was just so beautifully written. I think it did a great job with relationships, and their flashbacks that were put in here seamlessly because they are high school sweethearts. One of the major, I want to say, I guess, themes of this book is falling in love with your soulmate, but doing that before you almost had a chance to find yourself. So there's a lot of self-discovery in this book, and the off-the-grid hike was like the perfect forced proximity moment. The forced proximity made them have to come to terms with their problems and actually talk about it. I read this in one sitting too. Kind of regret doing that because then I like didn't get to savor it since I did read it in one sitting. But the beginning half of this book, when their marriage is at a breaking point and they're at personal crossroads, totally giving You're Losing Me by Taylor Swift, totally giving My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys by Taylor Swift. Please read this if you read any of the books in this video. Then we have The Crash by Frida McFadden. This was not good, sorry. It was 2.5 stars. That's me being generous. I actually read this while I was running a fever, so I feel like that made me almost more patient with it because my brain was like not functioning properly to actually like analyze the book properly. I was so excited for this book to release. I always eat up Frida McFadden's book. This one was just not good. The female main character, again, just like the resort, her car like slides off the road and there's the middle of the blizzard. Then this couple picks her up and takes her back to their house, and she is pregnant and her ankle also is broken because of the car crash. The couple takes her back to their house and then they kind of kidnap her, and yeah. There was just like not a lot going on, but at the same time there were too many things going on. Plot twist almost just existed just to say there was a plot twist. It didn't really make any sense, and just half the time the female main character was just lying in the basement. Like, that's kind of boring. The big reveals were so anticlimactic and everything that happened was just way too convenient. Then we have A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I loved Divine Rivals by this author. If you haven't read Divine Rivals, couldn't recommend this more. Rebecca Ross's prose is so good. This book is just so atmospheric and beautifully written. So if you like lower stakes fantasy with poetic storytelling, definitely would recommend A River Enchanted. So one of our male main characters, Jack, is a bard and he's studied music on the mainland for 10 years, but then he receives a summon to return home to his island of Cadence, which is a magical island where he grew up. And the reason why he's asked to return is because there are girls going missing and his childhood rival thinks he's the solution to finding them, because with his music he's able to talk to the spirits that live on the island. Love books with fairy folklore. This book did a great job with it. The world building was so enchanting, and this is lower stakes fantasy, but the mystery element added a lot to this book and it made it a lot more intriguing. The writing style is romantic, but romance is definitely a subplot in this book. I actually didn't love the romance between Jack and Adira, who is the female main character. I felt like it didn't really work because they didn't have that much chemistry. But there's two other main characters in this book and their romance was so good. They had a marriage of convenience and then they fell in love for real, which I love. A little bit slow in the beginning, but overall this was beautiful and I could not recommend this more if you love fantasy. One more, Spiral. I read the arc of this, so thank you so much to the publisher. I wasn't like the biggest fan of Collide, which is the first book in the series of interconnected standalones. However, Spiral was so much better. I gave it 4.5 stars. This is a great sports romance with a lot of emotional depth. The male main character is a hockey player and it's his rookie season, and the female main character is a ballerina. First of all, I like when the male main character in sports romances isn't like the star athlete. He is a rookie and he's honestly kind of struggling professionally. He thinks he's gonna get cut because he still hasn't scored his first goal and he's trying to like improve professionally, so that's one of his struggles. And same with Sage, because she can't get an audition, but then they decide to fake date, so the male main character receives more positive press and so the female main character gets more press too, and then therefore she can get an audition. They become roommates too, so there's some forced proximity. This is definitely slow burn and the tension was so good. I loved it. Only reason I didn't give it 5 stars is because the like last 25% of the book, the pacing got really weird. It just seems like the ending of the book was just dragged out and I'm like, we could have just wrapped this up a little quicker. But overall, I love this book. Couldn't recommend it more. But that is it for the January 2025 reading wrap up. I hope you read some of these, especially Out of the Woods. Please read that one. It was so good. Let me know if you like the longer style of video because I had a lot of fun kind of reviewing all the books that I read. Thank you so much for watching. Comment down below one of your favorite books from January. Subscribe to my channel, like this video, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Goodreads for more bookish and other lifestyle content. I'll see you next time. Thanks again for watching. Bye.